Well, happy Monday, and we are back at it. Good to be with you guys. Missed you guys last week, but glad to be back.
I haven't seen you in about a month.
That's not true. I had like a 3-day weekend, and now it's been a while. But have some great questions, and excited to jump into it after, I'm sure, a lot of baseball questions today, by the way.
Yeah, it's a mix. Basketball, baseball, football.
Yeah, basketball is hot, and baseball, that was fun to watch as they opened up their season. So here we go. Our first question is from Razorback Redneck, who asked, what did you think about the Tennessee game? It was ugly. Neither team could throw the ball into the ocean, but there was some serious defense being played.
Yeah, and both teams played defense, and Eric Musselman was quick to point that out afterward, talking about how physical, he likes games like that. It was tough, it was a gut check. Tennessee shot 27% from the floor, 16% from three-point line, lowest numbers for a ranked opponent at Bud Walton since 1996. That's pretty impressive. So with both teams not shooting at all, hardly, what was the difference in the game? Well, there was a 3-minute stretch from about 8 minutes in the second half to 5 minutes in the second half where Arkansas hit 3 threes, one of them by Chris Likes, two by Devo Davis. That's 9 points. That put them up by 9. And then for the rest of the game, Tennessee was forced to foul. And Chris Likes hit 4 free throws. I think Arkansas hit 7 overall during that stretch. So all of that was the difference in the game. So even if you're not shooting well, you can win a game by shooting when it matters. And that's really was the difference in that game, plus the tremendous defense that was being played in that game. Yeah,
hey, shout out to Jaylin Williams, by the way, SEC Player of the Week for his performance this past week. All right, Jumpity wants to know, what are your thoughts on Rick Barnes' rant about officiating after the game on Saturday? He seemed especially upset about the charges, and good old Jaylin Williams.
You know, I think he was very clever, because if he had worded it slightly different, he'd have probably gotten a fine. I haven't seen that he's been fined. Usually, if you criticize officials after a game, the SEC will fine you. I haven't heard that they did. Here's what he was basically saying, that Jaylin Williams draws a lot of charges that are actually blocks. It should be the foul should go on him, because he's really good at sliding under an oncoming offensive player while that guy's still in the air. And therefore, he's not leaving, for instance, his guys a chance to come down, which is the rule. Here's what I would say about that. The block charge call is probably the toughest in basketball. Is real similar to the first base bang-bang play at first base. Now, what do we do in the SEC if there's a bang-bang play at first? You review the call. Well, you can't review every block charge. Okay, it's not practical. But I will say that if we went back, and I think he's got 41 charges that he's taken this year, if you reviewed every one of them, you would probably find a few that they would overturn, but they're not going to do that. And the thing about Jaylin is he almost has a sixth sense, said this yesterday on the pig trail, almost a sixth sense of where to move, at what time, and always keeping those back heels over that line. He's real good at that. I went back and looked at some of them, and you might see, I looked for several games. Again, there might have been a few that could have been overturned if you reviewed them. But I think here's another thing that happens. When somebody is really good at something like that, I don't care what sport it is, if you have a reputation of being really good at something, the refs will go with you. So Barnes probably knows that. Now, here's the real issue. He's now complained. What does that do?
It'll be interesting.
Do these officials go, hey, we better go, maybe we should? So are we suddenly going to see down the road in these final few games, are we going to see Jaylin drawing some blocking fouls? That could make the difference in the game if they start doing it. So I think he was very clever in what he did and very clever in the way he worded it, but I think he should be fined.
You know, Marty Houston, who works with us, and some people might remember his show, The Huddle, was talking about how I think the record is like 168 in like your career at Arkansas charges taken, and Jaylin Williams has 41 this year. I'm interested to see where he is with like how many he had last year and this year, and like where he is on like the charges taken total record per se at Arkansas.
And we're just talking about charges. What about rebounding? He's already one of the top rebounders ever at Arkansas.
And he does it with that smile on his face.
And you know, I made this point. if he didn't, with those charges, if he didn't score a point, he would be a valuable weapon. But he does score, and he rebounds.
Yeah.
So, what a player.
Love us some Jaylin Williams. All right, a Tennessee fan was mad enough to post this on Twitter. Arkansas wants to be in the top tier of the SEC so bad, but it's never going to happen. Always going to be known as a B-plus program. And then Big Phil, 870, was having none of that. He responded, talking down while talking to a program miles above them. They'll never even sniff a Final Four. Have they won a national title in basketball?
I don't think so.
Okay, all right.
And that's an interesting point. Look, this is Twitter stuff.
Sure.
And it's fun.
Everyone's
they
got
go
opinions.
But never underestimate the ability of someone to look like a moron on Twitter because they don't seem to matter.
Yeah.
But when you start talking about Arkansas having no tradition in all this, I guess that this guy he's probably not old enough to remember when Arkansas, the first year that they were in the SEC, they went to Rupp and beat Kentucky at a time under Rick Pitino when Kentucky was beating every SEC team. They were one of the first teams to go in there and beat them. And he did it twice. Nolan did it twice. Arkansas won a national championship. Arkansas went to the Elite Eight last year. Tennessee was one and done in the tournament. Arkansas had a much better SEC record than Tennessee did last year. And Arkansas has the same record with Tennessee this year, but a better overall record. So, what are you talking about there?
Sure.
You know, it's just a Tennessee fan that was mad, I guess.
Well, you know, if you're going to get on Twitter and say something, you got to come with facts because Arkansas Twitter
will come back.
They'll get after you. They'll get after you. What Devo Davis said one time. He said, "Arkansas Twitter, man, they get you. Like they don't mess around on Arkansas Twitter. No. All right." Team Otis, I'm kidding, that's a joke. Team Otis wants to know, should Jaylin Williams head for the NBA after the season or stick around and keep developing at Arkansas? Also, is Jaylin the best player on the team? I'd love to know.
You know, what he should do is what he wants to do. And, you know, he will get a draft evaluation. Muss always gives these players an accurate draft evaluation, which they'll go talk to other NBA scouts and say, okay, where do you think this guy will go? It's not 100%, but it's a good, accurate evaluation of where you stand. And he'll look at that and decide two things. Is it the right time to go? And the other thing is, do I want to go right now? We don't know.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of these fans think that we're just like personal pals with these players. We're not really allowed to talk to them except after games, and that's generally not. Even if you ask him a question like that, I'm not sure he would tell you exactly how he felt. So I haven't seen any indication from him how he feels about coming back, not coming. I made a point earlier on this show, maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks, that he's playing so well, he's gotten himself into the conversation.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Now, is he the best player on the team? Oh, absolutely. Is there anybody better?
I think you could argue. I think the argument is Note. And who's more valuable? I don't know if best because they have different skills. Who's more valuable, Jaylin Williams or JD Note?
We've seen Note go to the bench over and over again because of his foul troubles, and they still win. You let Jaylin sit for that long and see what happens.
That's a true point. It'd be interesting to see what that looks like.
He may be the only player on this team right now that with real NBA potential. I'm not saying get to the NBA for a few games. I'm saying he might have the ability to go there and stay for a while. I don't think anybody else does.
Like Bobby Portis.
Yeah.
You know, and you gotta love Jaylin, but I think you're right. You know, the best person to ask about this NBA stuff is like mom and dad. Go find Jaylin Williams' mom and dad.
See what they think
and
about
see what they say. All right, Hogs fan 88 wants to know, can you explain the conference schedule rotation for SEC basketball? Ever since the league expanded to 14 teams, 18 games, and eliminated divisions, I have been unsure of the rotation pattern for playing teams once and others twice. How do you see it changing when Oklahoma and Texas joins?
Okay, I put up a graphic because it's a little complicated, so I felt like graphics would make it a little bit easier. Now let's look at it. Each team plays the other 13 teams at least once in a season. In addition, each team has what is referred to as a permanent opponent, and teams play those three permanent opponents twice in a season. For Arkansas, the permanent opponents are Missouri, Texas A&M, and LSU. And then to fill out the 18-game schedule, two more teams are played twice in the season, and those two teams rotate every year until you've rotated all around.
So who has it been this year? It's been Mississippi State and Tennessee, right?
I think
the
that's
other two.
Right. And then next year it'll be two other teams, and they'll keep doing it until they get back and start all over again. So, I mean, what would it be if you went to 16 teams? So I got a graphic on that. and this is just my speculation because they haven't said. I'm going to guess that each team would play the other 15 teams once every season, and then there would be either 3 permanent opponents played twice in a season, or you would just go to 3 rotating teams played twice in a season.
Which one would you prefer?
I think you ought to rotate it among all of them.
I think so.
You know, if you're just going to do that, I don't like that you got to play these guys all the time, but you don't play these other. So I would favor that, but I have no idea what.
I mean, I'd love to play more frequent home and home with like a Kentucky or a Florida or something like that, because you know at this point you don't go to Gainesville or vice versa.
That would be a permanent if you got Kentucky as a.
Well, I mean, like it would rotate. It would be more frequent because right now.
Yeah, if you do the rotating, then you're going to get that.
It's been a long time since they've had home and homes with them.
Yeah.
I think it would make it more frequent. All right, I like that answer though. We'll see what happens. All right, Arkansas for Hogs 88 says, with one series in the books of the 2022 baseball season, how are we feeling about the Diamond Hogs?
Well, we talked about this before, and you were at that first game. I mean, that was a shock to everybody because nobody expected them to lose that game. But if you really look at it, everybody's talking about the poor hitting. Well, it turns out it's not as bad as you think it was, but they did lose that one game. I think what may be at work here is Illinois State may end up being better than some of the teams that some of the other SEC teams beat. Here's the key on that. Arkansas was the only one of some of those top SEC teams that lost. Several others, like Ole Miss, swept the series and even bombed the other opponent, but Arkansas didn't drop.
Yeah.
So to me, it's
didn't Mississippi State lose their first game too? Can I look that up?
Sure,
don't be offended.
There are several like Ole Miss and LSU that just blasted.
I really felt like they got shut out, but you keep going. I want to look that up.
Blasted their opponents. And so it just looks like to me that, at least I think it was collegiate baseball, didn't drop them at all. And then if you go on Twitter, all these fans are mad, non-Arkansas fans. What are you talking about? They lost. Blah, blah, blah. And I think it probably is an indication that that publication looked at who Arkansas played and looked at how it worked out and everything. I mean, let's face it. You got to look at who the opponent is, and even this time of the year, do we know how good any of these opponents are? I mean, I think Illinois State's pretty good.
Yeah.
Dave Van Horn's familiar with their program. He's friends with their coach. They know a lot about Arkansas. Arkansas knows a lot about them. I think it made for almost a conference-type atmosphere as opposed to playing somebody you're just going to beat the fool out of. And I give Dave Van Horn a lot of credit for scheduling somebody like that to kind of let him know where his issues were. And again, what we thought was going to happen was they would have really good hitting and bad pitching. The hitting wasn't bad overall, and we'll look at that later on. It's just there were they left too many guys on base, and it got them beat in one of the games. But the pitching was like a total shock. It was like, wow, look at these guys.
Yeah, I mean, outside of Connor Nolan, you know, you hit that second batter in that opening game, put him on base, and he ends up being that first run for Illinois State. You don't do that. That run doesn't score. You could possibly win that game. So I don't think. Again, it was one game, and it's really hard to be critical of this team because it's baseball. And to make a point, your defending national champions got blanked by Long Beach State 3-0 in their first game in Starkville, and then lost 13-3 in the second game. So and then they beat Long Beach State 12-4. So look, baseball is baseball, and your national, Mississippi State is 1-2 on the season right now.
Sure.
So anything can happen.
And some other teams again, like LSU. And Ole Miss just riding high. And so their fans are going, well, how come we didn't move up? You know, we should have moved past Arkansas. It's just not
Opponent's a big. I think this weekend's going to be big, though, for this baseball team. Do you talk about that later? I don't want to spoil.
No, I don't talk. Nobody asked about that. But I would say that Dave Van Horn scheduled this series to help them, to give him some proper information. Because, for instance, he's got options. A lot of the new guys were the ones that had trouble at the plate. He's got options. If you look at somebody through 3 games and they're not hitting the baseball, maybe you stick somebody else in there.
Yeah. Well, they go down, to the Round Rock Classic on Thursday, play Stanford, Louisiana, and some other teams. So it should be a good weekend for baseball. All right, Dennis Denny says it appears that one team came to play after the last game in that stadium. One would think the remaining members of that team would come to the field for some redemption. Obviously, they did not. It was a pretty It was not a pretty way to end an opening day tradition. Okay, we're still on baseball.
Yeah,
okay.
the end of the opening day tradition would be you didn't win the opening. And that first time they've lost a home opener since, what, 81 or something like that. Some people were saying lost an opener, and they've lost some openers because they've started on the road. But, yeah, that's too harsh. I think what you'll find, and we're going to take a look at some of these batting averages, you're criticizing the wrong players. If you're criticizing the guys coming back and saying they would have had more pride, first of all, it didn't even occur to me until I read this question to make the connection between they lost the last 2 home games of last year, and so now they've lost 3 in a row. And that's what he's basically saying.
That's 2 different teams, though.
Well, but what he's saying is all these guys that are coming back and they finished so poorly, wouldn't you be motivated to start in the first game of the season? And let's look at those batting averages again, and you'll see that that's not what happened here. These are all veteran guys except for Lanzilli at the bottom. All of those are guys coming back. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of those guys hitting 300 or above. Lanzilli's the only one of the newcomers hitting 300 and above. So it's unfair to criticize those guys. Basically, we've seen this in basketball and we've discussed it. When you're new, I don't care what your reputation was at another school or what your reputation was coming out of high school. It's new for you. You got new teammates, you got new coaches, you're playing at Baum Stadium for the first time. You got a little bit of nerves. Robert Moore said that. He said nerves are there. We don't want to admit it, but they're there. So instead of criticizing the returning players, you might ought to make a better observation that the new guys just didn't do what they were supposed to in this series, which doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what happens from here on out.
No, I don't think so. You know, Mike Neighbors has this comparison. He talks all the time. Sasha Goforth, who transferred in. She was an all freshman in the Pac-12 at Oregon State. She transfers here, but he continues to remind people when they're talking, she's still a freshman in our system. Doesn't matter what she did before. She's still a freshman in our system. So there is a little grace there. You got to remember that sometimes. It's like Michael Turner, for example. He might be super experienced. He's a senior coming in here, but it's his first time putting a Razorback uniform on.
Yeah, and we did see some of those guys finally on Sunday get a base hit. You know, it's going to take time.
Yeah, and it's early. Which is the best part about baseball, just getting started. All right, Brian Keith Williams says, we've had a pitching problem since we had to hire a new pitching coach a couple of years ago. Oof, we get what are supposed to be good pitchers, but they don't seem to improve. As a matter of fact, they seem to regress in some instances. Yeah, but the Yankees wanted Matt Hobbs, so I'm interested to see.
This is kind of like every once in a while you get a question that you're just kind of scratching your head, and this is an Arkansas fan, but I would say, first of all, were you asleep last year when Kevin Kopps did what he did? Matt Hobbs coached the Golden Spikes winner. He's a bad pitching coach? What are you talking about? It just makes no sense. And then if you look at last year, look, they didn't win. They didn't stay #1 for almost all of the regular season just on
Kevin Kopps.
On Kevin Kopps. There were other pitchers that pitched well at times, and they had a lot of injuries, and he had to move guys in and move guys out. Their pitching was pretty good last year, and yes, their hitting was good, but I didn't see any instances where people just started regressing. Now let's go to this year.
You know, I know that Connor Nolan has developed a new pitch this year.
Right. So let's go to this year, and let's take a look at this year. Now look at that. These are Arkansas's pitchers. Every one of those guys pitched over the weekend. A lot of zeros there, right? A lot of zeros.
Yeah.
So what, Matt Hobbs he was asleep, he stayed at home, somebody else coached these guys through last weekend.
They're coaching themselves.
Now let's look at the starting rotation. Not bad either. Hagen Smith, 18 years old, first game as a college player, 0 ERA, gets a win, goes 6 innings, has 5 strikeouts, scatters 5 hits. Jackson Wiggins, 1.80, looked better than he did last year. He also got a win. He went 5 innings and got 5 strikeouts. And Connor Nolan, even though he gave up 2 runs instead of 1, he had 5 strikeouts and scattered 5 hits. So if you had shown me those numbers before this weekend, I'd say, man, that's good. They probably win all 3 of those games. And it's just because they lost that one game that people get mad, and then they start thinking, well, wait a minute here, we lost that game. Bad pitching. Well, it was a hitting issue, so whatever.
Yeah, no.
Funny.
Don't come after Matt Hobbs like that. All right. About the shock of Arkansas's first home loss in the season opener since 1981. There you go. Kyle Shin wants to know, y'all are so worried, LOL, they beat us last March as well.
Yeah, he's reacting again to the fact that people were freaking out over that first game loss. Actually, he's wrong about that. It was the 2020 season. That was the COVID-shortened season. And right before the season was ended because of COVID, Arkansas did play Illinois State and lost a one-run game to them. It was a midweek game. So, to me, all that says is this is a good program. They've come in here now, and over the last 2 years, stretches back 2 years ago, but now through coming here twice in 3 years, they're 2-2 against Arkansas. So good program, I'd say.
Yeah. Little Wheezy asks, what are your thoughts on DVH's reference to shenanigans that he sees from other teams in the league? It certainly brought out the naysayers online who accused DVH of being no fun.
That was hilarious. Barstool people got all over him.
No.
First of all, I think you had to read the entire quote, which a lot of times they don't do on the internet.
Sure.
What he was basically saying is there's a point. I think one of the things he was trying to explain is he knows that it's hard on his players to do what he wants, which is to keep their mouth shut in one of these games where the other team's jabbering all the time and saying stuff when they come around third base or when there's any kind of interaction. And so he's acknowledging, look, I know it's hard on you guys, but I still think we're better off not doing that. And I don't like it personally. But he also said, if it gets to a certain point, I turn them loose. I just say, all right, you want to play that game? We'll play it too. So it's not that he's totally a no-fun guy. Now, I'm an old guy, so I'm going to defend the old guys. And I'll say this. I understand baseball. I've been watching some of the little kid. I've seen fights in the major leagues. We saw a fight in the stupid basketball game where Juwan Howard's like punching and stuff. We see all this stuff. And as long as it doesn't happen all the time, I don't have an issue with it occasionally happening. And I understand that there are certain things in baseball that you don't do, and if you do them, the other team's going to get mad, and they're going to go back and forth at each other and all that. But my basic feeling is trash talking is for the fans. They pay for the right to come in there and trash talk. The players should play baseball within reason. Doesn't mean you sit there with tape over your mouth, but it does mean that I think most people that aren't 12 don't go to a baseball game to see people yelling at each other. Some people would like it, but I would much rather see baseball. And I think that's what Dave Van Horn was saying. And that's an argument that will never be won because it's an age
just
argument.
An opinion. It's an opinion argument. I will tell you this. I mean, Dave very particular with what he likes and how his team handles each other and how they handle their business. It's why they're successful. But you know for a fact that Dave Van Horn will defend his team and stand up for his team. I mean, look at the exchange between him and Tony Vitello, and Tony's a friend.
Exactly.
But Dave said, I'm going to stand up for my guys. This is my team, and I will stand up for my team. And
also, there were a lot of fans involved in that Twitter war over that were assuming he was talking about their team. And those of us that cover this team, we were talking at the baseball game over the weekend, and I think most of us believe that most of that was directed at Ole Miss.
Oh yeah,
he does not like Ole Miss.
Oh no, That's why I'm looking forward to that series because it is always so fun.
Yeah.
All right, Mousetown says, what is going on with baseball? I live in Central Arkansas. Don't get to ball much, but I have friends who feel betrayed by the new season ticket policy. Oh man, the parking changes and apparently a new way of dealing with traffic.
Okay, we've kind of done this before, and I don't like to keep going over this again, so I'll do it one more time, and then I'm not going to address it anymore, because I've talked about it before.
Yeah.
This is just my opinion, but I do think baseball has been undervalued for several years. The program's gotten better. I don't know if some people were not paying attention, but Van Horn's always had good teams, but sometimes there's been gaps. 2 or 3 years you drop down. The last 4 or 5 years, Arkansas has been up there. And that increases the value of your product. The athletic department knew that. I think what they got an indication from their football and basketball season ticket holders was, hey, we'd like to go to baseball games and we're willing to pay.
Yeah.
So what are they going to do as people who have to are responsible for developing revenue for all the stuff that you have to spend to make this stuff work. So they're like, okay, we had that COVID thing we're going to have to make up for, and we got all this stuff. So yeah, we're going to do this. They did give people the opportunity to renew their seats where they were, no matter how long they've been there or how short. They didn't just kick people out. But if you couldn't afford the donation, sometimes as high as $5,000, and who knows what the tickets cost, but if you weren't willing to do that, then they moved you. Now, I looked at it and saw it visually over the weekend, and here's what I saw. I'm looking around for familiar faces. There's Bobby Smittle. He's still over there behind what now is the visitors' dugout, so he didn't move. He must have had chunked out the $500,000 because he's over there. But I also saw, you know, the chicken dance thing they do at between innings and the sixth inning? Those people are always behind the visitors' dugout. You know, they're way down there now.
Oh,
there's 2 or 3 of them out there doing it right where they used to, but most of them are pushed on down, and there aren't as many of them. Some of them clearly said, we're not doing this. There's a longtime guy I know that he's been coming to Baum Stadium as long as it's been there, and I always talk to him on the concourse. And he's got tickets to basketball, women's basketball, and baseball. And he said, this is my last year. And it wasn't just that. He just said, when you get older, you just kind of look at it sometimes and say, you know what, it's a lot easier just to watch it at home. TV's so good now, and you clear if you got a big screen. I got a big giant screen at home. Even if I'm off the day of a game, I'm perfectly fine sitting there watching the game like that, because it's almost like being there. And I've got I got an optical cable that comes out of my TV into a mixer and all that stuff, and it does surround.
You basically got your own home theater.
Yeah, it's a surround sound with the sound, and you can tune it the way you want it. And you know I don't like the announcers
technology.
anyway, so I cut the announcers almost completely off. You can barely hear them, and it's just noise everywhere. And I love to watch baseball.
You turn on Phil and Bubba.
Well, you can't do that.
Because you got to sync it up.
It won't sync because Cox Cable is like 30 seconds off. Did you know that?
Yeah.
I know that because I have friends that watch, like I have a buddy that watches Texas Tech games, and he calls me and says, hey, tune to the Tech game. And then he's 30 seconds ahead of me, and I'm like, don't tell me that.
I know.
So
what I hate is in our office, we have a TV over here you can't see, but it's connected to our cable, and that's where I can pull games and we watch games. Well, it also is connected to the control room. And the control room is able to put it up for like Dan or some of the PAs like to watch stuff.
So
They'll come in here.
Yelling.
They come in here and they're like, hey, can you put this game on? So I'll put the game on them, and they can watch it over in the next studio too. But for some reason, by doing that, they're like 20 seconds ahead of us. And so we're sitting there watching the game, and then you hear a cheer or, oh no. And I'm like, the one thing I hate is knowing what's going to happen before it happens, and I like already, I hate it. Oh, it's the worst. I have to go over there, and I'm like, be quiet. I don't want to get spoiled. Don't spoil it for me.
So again, to me, the reality is the baseball program's better. They're going to charge more money because they can get it. Now, here's the other thing. If you give up those seats, you're going to give up priority parking, because what a lot of the other complaints are, you were in the red lot, now you're crossing the East Baum Stadium lot, which means you're on the other side of Razorback Road, which means you got to walk across there in the crosswalk, and there's stop and go. It's not just get out in your car and walk straight across. So now I'm suddenly in the Baum East lot, and they don't like that. But again, that's part of the process of giving up the priority seats that you had. Now, this one thing I had to call over and ask, because the guy was like, oh man, there's some new way of exiting the Baum East lot, and they've got all these barriers up, and they closed them up, and you could just get out in one little place, and it took forever to get out. And he was all complaining about that. So I asked him, what's the deal with that? And what I was told is nothing has changed with barriers. They're doing it exactly the way they always did. The person I talked to acknowledged, I don't know, maybe we had 1 or 2 new parking attendants that are doing it for the first time, and they might be a little bit confused because they haven't done it yet. But he said, we had people over there watching how that emptied out, and it was their impression that for a season opening weekend, we emptied that lot faster than ever. So this is just somebody didn't like it, and they're saying, hey, this is what we're saying. So
Got it.
I don't know who's right, but I just gave you the answer.
There you
the
go.
answer that they gave.
That's all you can do. All right, Hog wants to know why no word on Pittman's contract and any thoughts on why he changed from Judy Henry.
We discussed this before. He said that he wanted to get a more aggressive agent, and you can't get more aggressive than Jimmy Sexton. He's probably top of the list, but he said he wanted to do it mostly to make sure he had the money to keep his staff together.
Yeah.
And I assume that's happened because they haven't had too many people leave because of that, because of money. You know, why hasn't he negotiated? Why haven't we heard an announcement of a new contract for Pittman? My guess is because they haven't come to terms yet. I guess Yurachek and Jimmy Sexton are going, nope, I'm not giving you this, I'll give you this. Nah, it's not good enough, and they go back and forth. I think some fans are nervous about this because they think in the end, they might not give him what he wants, and he's a hot property, and he might leave. I'm just telling you, he's not leaving. I know that guy pretty well. He's not leaving. He would not unless something crazy would have to happen for Sam Pittman to go somewhere else. I don't think it's going to be over money.
All right, Rob's 4516 wants to know, Coach Pittman looks to be making progress on the recruiting front, but what are your thoughts on how successful he will be long term? Do you think the Arkansas program has a built-in upper ceiling in the SEC?
Well, they've jumped the numbers up. Each of the three recruiting, 2020, 2021, 2022, it went up each year, and I think they're around 20th this year. And for 2023, they're off to a fast start. They're top 5 right now. Now, people I've talked to, like Otis, say it'll drop some as other teams. Right now, Arkansas is just being overly aggressive, more so than some. So it's going to drop. But if it stays anywhere near the top 10, that's tremendous progress made would be in 4 recruiting cycles. I don't think there is an upper tier ceiling. You may think that because you sit and watch recruiting year after year and you don't see Arkansas getting up there with Georgia and Alabama and some of these other schools. I've always said this, and I've said it for 20, 25 years. Frank Broyles had Arkansas in the 1960s a top 3 team. He did it with a staff that could recruit, and they had horrible facilities, absolutely horrible. If you went back and took a look at what the facilities were like for football in those days, you would be stunned if you don't remember that. And yet, look at who they brought in. They went they went into Louisiana, they went into Texas, Missouri. They got players, and if he can do it then, you can do it now. It takes the right coach with the right assistant coaches, and what I like about Pittman, I've said it before, is that he will fire you no matter how good a position coach you are if you don't recruit. He's made recruiting a #1 priority, and I think he learned that at Georgia from watching Kirby Smart, who had been at Alabama, and he's basically saying, we're going to do the same thing they do. How do we get to be with them in recruiting? We have to have the same emphasis. That is, everybody on the staff recruits, not 3 or 4 guys.
All right, here we go. We're going to close out some Ask Mike with some humor a little bit about the announcement for opening tryouts for students wanting a spot on the football team. And Dave Griffin says, oh, if I were a younger man, I still wouldn't make it.
Well, I don't know. I think is there a limit on how old you can be?
You just have to have eligibility.
Eligibility. So, but I don't think you would be playing football much beyond, what, 35?
Yeah, no.
So how many 35-year-old students do they have over there?
Probably
I'm sure
not.
They have a few, but I doubt many of them would want to be playing football. So I don't think that's an issue.
Bobby George says, well, I wouldn't make it as a player, but I think I would make a great assistant coach.
Well, too bad, because this is tryouts for players, not coaches. He's not holding open tryouts for coaches.
All right, and Jeanette Burlow-Faulkner likes it, but reminds us there are some rules. She says tryouts must have played football in high school or college and must bring their own football workout equipment.
Come on, rules. I hate rules. There's always rules
you know
to
what?
spoil the fun.
Speaking of rules and spoiling the fun, I have a question for you. Here's my question for the week. I've seen on Twitter, and I don't know if you follow Josh Teeter, but the whole standing in the hog pen and being yelled at for standing up in the hog pen, and someone called security because they were standing in the hog pen, and there are kind of these unwritten rules that aren't rules. How do you feel about standing in the hog pen?
You know, you always try to be polite to people around you, but on the other hand, it's kind of sports, and that happens in football a lot. I've seen it happen in football. The big difference between War Memorial and Razorback Stadium used to be that in War Memorial, you try something like that, they tell you to, no, some guy pick you up and throw you out onto the field. Those people were crazy. They just, whatever they wanted to do, they were going to do. And I still remember standing over there by that tunnel where the opposing team comes in one year, and I think it might have been Houston Nutt bringing Ole Miss in there, and there was some guy that stood up and went, boo, boo, and these people around him went, oh, no, that's terrible. We don't do that around here. And it looked like to me maybe some university professor and his wife or something. I'm going, what are you talking about? So it is sports. And, to me, if you're out in the hog pen, yeah, I mean, just deal with it. Stand up yourself. Why are you in the hog pen if you don't want to stand up? You don't have seats out there. Just stand up if somebody in front of you stands up.
There you go. Just stand up. I love it. All right, that is going to do it for Ask Mike this week. Always fun, always a pleasure. If you have a question for Mike, then hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, and our Ask Mike forum on hogville.net. Until next week, we'll see you.